Welcome, friends, to another episode of the little vignette series we're going to do here at the Cyber Mettle called Cert Corner. Anyone that knows me knows I get these in somewhat of a manic kind of anxious way. So, which I'll own and I'm working on. But before we get into exactly which one we're going to carve up today, joined as always by the amazing Alyson Laterman.
Hey, Omar, thanks for having me. Happy to join you on the little Cert Corner that we're going to start here.
Exactly. So today we're looking at the COSO ERM, Enterprise Risk Management. There's different flavors of this type of certification. You can grab it from a couple of different providers. This one, the particular that I sat with, was the AICPA. Figured it's sort of tangential to cybersecurity. I've seen those letters before in my lifetime, so that's where I kind of went there. I'll say this, definitely outside the comfort zone. Why enterprise risk management? We'll start there, right? Like where we've kind of mid-career, I'd say, right around, the mark, I'm at here, mid-career, I don't know, right? Like it's time is ever marching ever onwards, but theoretically mid-career, you have cybersecurity places sometimes where you're doing board reporting. You're sitting there and kind of trying to translate like the cyber risk portion of the show to a broader enterprise look at what could tank an org, what is an existential threat to an organization. Sometimes cyber rises to that level, sometimes it doesn't. But if it's not speaking the language of everyone else in those rooms, I noted that then you're kind of, not quite at the kiddie table, but, if they invite you into the room, they make you stand, right? I'll say that. Like so I was, you know, cracked open Gemini and asked, hey, how do I bridge this? This is what I'm facing. Looking at doing some development in 26. What can I get after? And I will be honest, when this first popped up on the suggestions, I said, no. I said, wait a second, but I'm a cyber guy. What am I doing? What's going on? And it continuously kept bringing me back to, and then I did obviously some side research because as we both are proponents of is don't trust and definitely verify, right? Is kind of my
That's
stance
right.
with AI
That's right.
at this point. So kept asking, kept looking, asked people at my org, asked around, and I kept getting the sense that, hey, this actually might be a way to go, especially given where I'm looking potentially at getting into third-party risk management. We're looking at maybe trying to, again, bridge those gaps with even at my organization, some of the different silos that exist around risk. So I said, okay, fine. Now, it was a good wake-up call, I'll say, right? Like I said at the top of the call, I take a lot of these. I just like to keep the skill sharp. But this is definitely not one where for other risk management ones or other like cyber related risk management ones, maybe I could kind of have it on in the background and go about my day and just listen to it like a podcast, like we're doing now, and then potentially get other stuff done. Maybe have it soak in. Maybe if something jumps out that's dissonant or discordant, right? Like, hey, that's not how I think of it, then stop and think. This one, I will say, at least for where I was, where I am in the career, had to stop and give it my full attention. So it took a little longer than I was factoring in, but I'm glad, obviously, I took the time because there's enough overlap that you can get by in certain instances, but there's not quite enough where you can just breeze through as a cyber
Okay.
professional, right? You have your Asakas of the world, you have other risk management kind of framework takes and definitely work in the cyber realm for sure. That's going to they're going to be speaking, I think, from the same hymn sheet. But when you kind of try to make that leap into enterprise risk management, there's different perspectives, there's different lenses, different things matter, different vocabulary. And so that's where I found myself going, hey, I need to take extra time, got to sit and kind of give it with that beginner's mindset. And then I will say, jumping ahead a little bit to the actual exam, the exam kind of evidenced almost the same sort of thing, which is the final exam, oddly enough, was fairly straightforward, but the section exams that you had to get through the content in order to unlock that final one were bananas, just straight bananas. Like I just, having spoken with you and learning a little bit about like what the test making process can be, right? Getting a little bit
Hmm.
behind that veil. I wanted to ask you, like, is this something that's done on purpose? Or is it just a factor of like maybe the material should be refreshed? Or because it just seemed like some of the questions were murky, not what, like, from your perspective, what
Yeah,
would you say there?
I can share from how the sausage gets made perspective in
Sure.
general. I don't know how that particular flavor of sausage got made, but
Yeah.
in general, so people understand, when you're picking which agency you want to take your certification exam
Hmm.
with, it does
Hmm.
help to know how they structure their questions and whether or not they're using red herrings, whether or not they're trying to deliberately trick you. I can tell you at my prior job that our two goals were, one, we were never going to use red herrings, and that we were never going to deliberately try to trick you, right?
Mm.
We obviously have to include wrong answers in there, and you have to include answers that are close enough,
Hmm.
right? But nothing that you go, let me fight over this type of, that type of thing. We want it to be clear that if you're paying attention, if you've studied the material and you've got your practical experience, you know what the answer is. And so, you know, as part of that exam making process, what's interesting is, I'm going to go with most and put that in quotes, but I could, I'll speak from my prior employer. So at the prior place, specifically what we would do is we'd have one subject matter expert come in, and, the organization was very careful about, here's how we like to word our questions so that they are consistent. This is how we use the phraseology. This
Hmm.
is what we're looking for. We don't do these things. Please make sure you end in a period or whatever. We had very specific rules of how we wanted them put together.
Hmm.
We'd have one subject matter kind of precede the questions. So that person would go in and write in a bunch of sample questions,
Hmm.
and that would start the process. So then the other subject matter experts, typically somewhere between 20 and 30, would come in. They would review it, and it would have to be approved by two separate subject matter experts, any question that gets put in the system. And so they always have the guidelines. They
Hmm.
always have the, what are we trying to align with? So what's the job that we're from our job task analysis at the very beginning of that process? Are we in alignment with that? Are we meeting the metrics? Are we doing the outline, the blueprint? Are we following that blueprint? And then the experts would go through and actually rate how hard they think the question was, if the clarity is a problem or not. Is there a
Hmm.
word choice that might be a little bit better? Were the answer choices too obvious, either too obviously wrong or too obviously right? Or did it look red herring y? Is there
Hmm.
something that maybe, hey, in my job, this makes it look confusing compared to what the book says I should do?
Sure.
And then those questions would get flagged, and then they would get either revised or tossed out. If they're revised, they then go back into the hopper for two more approvals from the experts again.
Okay.
So it was a pretty comprehensive process on our end to ensure that it met what our requirements were.
Hmm.
Now, whether or not every organization follows that, I can't say. Uh,
Gotcha.
but that's where kind of doing your homework and due diligence, right? So you've now taken one from that particular organization. I suspect if you go back in and take another one and it feels the same, well, then it's the process, right? It might be the experts they're using. It could be outdated material. It could be they want to throw in things that are a bit murkier that you
Sure.
have to parse through. In a multiple choice format, of course, that's very limiting. Like a bar exam is deliberately murky, right? For
Sure.
a lawyer,
Sure.
but you have the opportunity to write out your answer. It's always not
Hmm.
always, part of it's multiple
Part of
choice,
that.
but the murky stuff tends to be in the essay part, where you
Hmm.
then can go through and say, well, if it's this, X, Y, and Z, and if it's
Hmm.
this, it's A, B, C.
Gotcha.
If you have multiple choice, you don't have that option. And
Hmm.
so, our position at the company was, we should make it clear.
Mm.
Well, it's not meant to fool you. We can't just rubber stamp and pass everybody. Also, I mean,
Sure.
the level of the questions need to be appropriately difficult. I know that the owner of the company was a very big proponent of following the Bloom's taxonomy,
Sure.
which is, how they determine the levels and how they work in. Is it an analysis question? Is it a summary type of question? Is it just
Hmm.
a memorization, rote recall
Hmm.
scenario? And you really should have like a mix of those different types. And, having not taken the one you just went through, I can only say, we used a mix
Sure.
of the types to make sure that it was well balanced.
Hmm.
So it didn't feel completely bananas when you go through the process, that it felt that there was some level of progression. But all of our questions were also randomized. So there weren't really checkpoints to get to like a final exam. It's much
Gotcha.
more of, here's the 50 or 100 questions you need to know. Questions were randomized. The answers were randomized so that you couldn't cheat easily. Hey, the
Gotcha.
answer to 5 is C.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you may not even get the same form. Never mind, had the questions in the same order with the answer choices in the same order. So those are all kind of things we did on the other side. So with your experience on this particular exam, it could be any number of factors from, were there clear instructions to the experts as to what they were looking for or not?
Gotcha.
What was the knowledge base of those experts? How do they like to formulate their exams? There may be a reason that they made it a bit more murky for their particular testing methodology. So, just a little insight on how general sausage is made. But having not seen this particular exam or been through this particular experience, I don't want to. I can't really say for sure what they did, obviously, on that end.
Absolutely.
But
And I'm taking it also with the same grain of salt, kind of caveating it even in my experience, because again, it wasn't built right necessarily for cyber professionals or even cyber risk professionals, right? Which is like another, like more like niching down, right? Even from just cyber to cyber risk. And then now this is more kind of a branch off, right? Where you can maybe kind of understand a little bit about likelihood, impact, that risk is something necessary in order to go out and do business. There's positives and negatives to risk, etc. Certain levels are going to be toxic for the organization and kind of, so like there was enough there that kind of made sense. But again, I will say, because it's not my full bag, right? It's not my, where I live, yet at this point in my career. But I do take that as well, right? With your advice, could be how the sausage was made, as you said, or it could be the fact that, I'm just not, this is not my cuisine, right? It's not my, my slice of, I'm much more of a dirty water dog guy, right? And being from where I come from versus the weird stuff they do in Chicago with their hot dogs. I just shout out to my Chicago friends, but y'all have a particular way of doing hot dogs, and that's how it's done over there. But it was refreshing. It was a nice, like, hey, again, when you go out of your comfort zone, you have to flex different muscles. You have to go back to the beginner's mindset. So it was nice. It was nice to kick off the year, right at the beginning of this year with a kind of a little different, little nuanced sort of approach. What I will say, yeah, please, if you have
yeah, I was going to say,
Mhm,
based on your experience,
mhm,
and with the position you're currently in,
mhm.
who would you recommend that would benefit from this type of knowledge and this experience from this certification? Who would be a good audience that maybe they wouldn't consider it otherwise?
Sure. I would say that any CISO or aspiring CISO, I would say that you're going to have to be doing presentations to like non-technical audiences, say a board or an executive leadership team, or even a senior leadership team. If you're trying to translate what is near and dear to our hearts in the cyber world to a non-cyber audience and then get them to care, I think that was probably, and it was funny for me because in this cyber lane, I feel one of my strengths is being able to tie it back to business needs. You always constantly see me like on socials. That's kind of, my tried and true, right? Like, but there's levels to even that, right? There's being good at it in a room full of cyber folks. And then there's being good at it in a room full of folks that have been talking to the board and talking business. It's funny. It's an inversion. I'm a cyber person that can talk business. At maybe the next levels, at the next tiers, there's just straight up business people that talk in finance or that talk cyber or that talk patient safety, right? In my position, that's, I think, the next kind of, Pokemon evolution that I was trying to get exposure for and trying to figure
Good.
out. And it was humbling in a good way, right? In an odd way, I felt better that it was hard. Like, it was
Okay.
nice, right? It was one of those, like, you gotta get punched in the mouth slightly and kinda, "Oh, it tastes like copper," and then, "Okay, now we're in one," like, and then go forward,
Sometimes
yeah.
you don't learn unless it's clearly something you don't know yet, right? Like you said, it's getting out of that comfort zone and saying, wait a minute, I need to stretch that new muscle and
Yep,
figure it out.
it was great.
For some basic info for anybody who has not heard of the exam, this particular certification, or wants more information, how long was the exam? What was the
Sure.
cost? How
Yep.
long did it take you to prep? What kind of
Yep.
info can you share with the audience on
So
that?
so this is definitely one on the pricier side, and I think as because of like where it's positioned as that kind of gateway to talking to the board, I think you have like there's just a natural like upping of the price is kind of what I got. So as with many of these types of certifications, you get a member price and a non-member price. I want to say that the non-member price was about like 1300, like 13
Okay.
50. I think the
Yeah.
member price would have been somewheres like around $900. And
Still
again,
hefty. Yeah.
it's still hefty. And I went back and again, ask Gemini, right? Like, hey, what's the math? I'm seeing this. Like, does the membership make sense? Because in some cases, right, it does. Some cases it doesn't,
I was going
depending
to
on.
ask if membership's 400 for the year,
Yeah, right,
you know,
exactly. And it sort of did, but I feel, and this is again where like my old self is creeping through. Like, I think I would have had to wait to get approval for membership, and also I think technically you had to show that like you were doing CPA type work for a little bit, which of course that's
interesting.
not me, but like non-members, they still kind of position this as even for non-CPAs, right? This might be like a good, toe tester here. The whole course, I was like, this is going to sound weird, right? And it's going to sound like, hey, Omar, are you okay? Right? Annie, are you okay? But I I kind of yeah, listen, it was weird. I definitely had my cert plan ready to go and iterated, before Christmas, like before, the holidays, mid-December. I was like, how am I gonna punch 2026 in the head? Go out and get after it. Definitely 1201 on 1-1. I was on there and I added it. Went to bed, the baby woke me up in a couple hours, and then I just didn't go to bed, right? So, like, from, like, 3:30 to 4, so I had it took me, like, 2 days, right? But I will say mileage may vary and, depending on, like, what type of weird sleep thing you're going through. The holidays are a funny time for me, so it was good to, like, funnel
Yeah.
that into this, but I would say probably anywhere from, like, 20 to 30 hours. Like,
Okay.
regular, like,
All
if you're
right.
if you're pacing it. So nothing too nuts, and then the requirement is it's not, you have to buy the course in order to be able to take the exam, so it's not like, you bought the course
So they
just
sell
to.
both.
Yeah, they sell, and it's a straight package. I don't think you can sit for the exam without, buying the
Taking their
course.
training course. So
Taking
then it's
their
not an ISO 170.
No, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, yep, and that I knew enough, right, from our previous work together that I was like, "Wait a second." There's one that's similar to this, again, also offered by the AICPA, that's on the COSO internal controls framework, and
Okay.
I only bring that one up because it was hard for me to disambiguate the 2, even when I was doing my research, and you know me, like, I researched the heck out of, what I'm gonna, get into. And it was like, wait a second, apples, oranges, apples, apple. Like, it took me a second to really sit and go, hold on again. Cause it was, maybe because it wasn't just like a thing I knew from cyber world. I then,
Did it look like there's a lot of crossover, like when you
it
looked
did.
at the objectives for both
It,
exams?
it
Okay.
really, it really did. And it was funny because the exam for the internal controls framework was it seemed a little bit more formalized. Like, it was just, but, the exam for this one for the ERM, right, which is the one I decided on again
So
because it
wait, did you
was.
take the other one as well?
Oh,
Or
no,
you did previous? Oh, okay.
I looked at it and I said, which one was I gonna take? That one was also a little pricier even. I think it was more like the 1,800, like 1,900. Right, yeah, listen, I
Yeah.
mean, gotta gotta up my side hustles to support this habit, but, but it's,
Well, I was gonna say, and just for the audience, right?
sure.
You're paying that out of pocket. It's not something covered by your organization or anything that they've asked you to do at this point.
No, exactly. They didn't ask me for it. It was something I was thinking that maybe potentially would help out. So that's a consideration as well. And the test itself, I want to say like the final was about 60 questions, give or take. I had the 2 hours to do it, right? The 120 minutes. So it wasn't like a breakneck
Okay,
by
so
any
2 minutes a
standards.
question on average,
That's which is, I
kind of
mean,
jam.
it's a that's an eternity, right? Like truly, if you really,
Right.
with some of the testing, like again, when some testing suites decide to make that right a level of difficulty for some reason, like it's
Hmm.
I don't know. In my opinion, seems artificial, but
I mean, are these scenario based or is it more just kind of memorize and brain
they
dump?
were.
What was kind of the feel?
I want to say most of them truly were like memorized brain dump. The way the COSO the ERM framework was set up is, you have these 20 principles, or you have like 5 domains, and then you have 20 principles inside of those domains, right? So some
Mhm.
domains have like 4, some have 5, some have 3, and it's just kind of the overall theme was like showing how risk management activities do fold into the DNA of the business. And I think that was one of my biggest takeaways, because it's also something that in the cyber realm we can sometimes forget, where we're
Fair.
not doing cyber for cyber's sake. This is to support and in defense and support of business objectives that may not necessarily sometimes may not care what we're up to. And like we have to get them to care. We have to show them we care what they're doing and that we're doing it in support of that, versus like I have controls and I said so, like that, you know, it's just not and even the way the visual that sticks with me, the COSO helix, I said DNA because that's how they arrange it. Like they want to show that it's really interwoven into what the business needs in order to achieve its objective. So like the biggest juxtaposition is, from the cyber risk perspective, I'm talking threats and vulns. From the COSO, the ERM perspective, right? I'm talking strategy and performance and how that work. And so I wanted to be able to then, bring it back to my org and help us make that translation a little bit more readable for the rest of the organization. And yeah, I will say that the again, like the unit questions for the
Hmm.
sections were, I mean, they were something. I gotta say, like, I just sat there, and some of it I will say, hey, first day, if I'm, if I'm speed running it from 3 to 8, that's on me, right? But then I took a nice nap, figured it out, sat there, let it simmer for a day. I came back to the other half of it, and I was like, this stuff is still tough. Like, and like you said, it was, in my opinion, again, I'll caveat it with it. This is not my bag, so maybe, but like a lot of red herring type stuff, really, like a lot of splitting
Okay.
hairs and a lot of wait a second, this is how we do it at the job. Again, not the same job, so I'll say that as well. But and then so that's why like I legit was, and I felt like it was like a good nervous. I felt like a good nervous in terms of like the test coming, right? The final. And then when I finally get into it, I'm like, oh, this ain't wow. It felt like just a wave of relief. But,
Hmm.
I will
And was it
say
open book? Like as you're
it
reading each
was,
section?
yeah,
It was open
it
book.
was
Okay.
open
Because that's
book,
the vibe I was getting. So I was like, wait.
which is nuts to me because like even open book, Alyson, the section tests were incredible. Like that's what, and but I will say, like, as I like to say, I sweat more now, bleed less later. So I'm glad that the final seemed easy in comparison, but like the level of granularity that they went into, and again, like the level of, but there's a few where I stumbled on the first pass. For the section ones, they let you retake them. For the final, you had to, it was just a one and doneer. But for the section ones, I would go back and reread the material, and I'm like, listen, this answer is still what I'm getting from here, but okay, if you say so, and then, continue. Right. Honestly, I'll be completely
Yeah.
frank. But on the whole, I will say I'm glad I did it. I'm glad that, because again, as I'm learning, right, continuously learning now, it's about how to translate what we're doing
Hmm.
in the cyber realm to what's going to matter and why it does matter, or why other people should care. Not just talking threads, bones, and cool cyber stuff. So, yeah, I'm glad to have taken it.
Well, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that. just for me, for clarification, having not taken it. So each of the sections had their own quiz within there that was open book. With the final, was that a proctored thing, or it's just you just keep
No,
going and you just
final
take it?
it wasn't proctored. It was timed. Like I'll say that,
Okay.
so, and then that was also the difference I want to say with the internal control framework one. And this was also the
Mhm.
difficulty even researching it, because researching it, I would pop up answers that now I know, oh, they were really talking about not answers in terms of like answers to the test, but like questions on should I take this?
Mhm.
Like doing my pre-research. Some
Right.
of the answers were tying back to, because I was asking, okay, is this proctored? How do you gotta get ready? Because then I plan out like, do I get into it on New Year's Day, or do I save a weekend, right, to take the final? Like how we're gonna play this.
Mhm.
It told me it was proctored, but that was because it was because it was thinking that it was the internal controls framework one, not the straight up COSO ERM one, right? So when and
Okay.
again, so that was my trepidation. I was like, listen, I'm having such a time with these sections. This thing's going to be proctored, and it's going to be, but heck, let's try it, right? Like nothing ventured, nothing gained. And then it just really, when I remember clicking and just like having my eyes closed, like, oh, and then open and then going, oh, this is, because I fully expected, right, hitting the let's start to, okay, take me to the proctor place, figure that out. I had all my stuff. I had my drapes. I use drapes to cover all my other screens, right? I was, because it's a pain like breaking it all down. So my wife had the great
Right.
idea one time of just like put a sheet over them. What are they going to say, right? Like, if they see you messing with the sheet, then you're cheating, but just don't mess with
Right.
the sheet. I'm like, and it works. So much easier again, but sitting there taking it, and again, the prep material, there's a ton of prep material out there that I know COSO puts out there, I think, because it wants this to be prevalent. In a lot of publicly traded companies, this straight up has to be there. There has to be an internal controls framework. You have to, and risk management, cyber is a piece of that, but like overall risk management, how you're doing things, how you're reporting things, that needs to be there. So COSO gets I think a lot of love, a lot of traction there. It has a kind of a kissing cousin, I want to say, like with the COBIT framework over in
Okay.
Cyberville, right? So that's where
Yeah.
I was familiar with the Treadway Commission and COSO and whatnot from there. But COBIT is definitely, absolutely more focused on IT governance, and a subset of that, right, being the cyber risk and all that fun stuff. Definitely not something I would suggest taking, like, hey, I know COBIT, so I can walk in there. Not saying I had that. I had a little bit of that, but I would dissuade folks from doing it. Good source of CPEs. Again, still a little pricey, right? If we're doing like $1 per CPE thing, it's still up there, right? It's getting to the $100 per CPE kind of mark, and there's absolutely free or alternatives that you're doing. Although I do say, and I looked into it, that most of the certs that I have do accept those even as CPEs, even if it's cyber, like just because it had a little bit of risk management flavoring to
Right.
it. So that was a plus. It's not a wash there. See anything else? I don't think so.
Is there,
If you,
do you have to, because it looks like it's a certificate as opposed to a certification, which is a
Mhm.
little bit different.
Yes.
And so do you have to maintain CPEs for this as well?
Don't think so. Nope.
Okay.
Not
And
not
so then
from
once
not,
you get the
yeah.
certificate, you're good. You don't have to
Not, yep.
renew it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So far, I don't think that is the same case with the internal controls framework. I have a feeling that I think you need to, but again, I will say this, and if anybody from AICPA is listening here, the SEO, right? The search engine optimization, like there's a lot of conflating for because they happen to be the two COSO certifications, right? That float up to that body's set of materials. It's, and I think that, I said, I committed to it. I told people I was going to take it, so I was going to get after it. But, I think the governing body or whatnot, right? Like the folks that put it out there could be better served by, I think, disambiguating it a little bit more, just kind of saying, hey, this is this lane, take this. I will say, and I'm spoiled, I think, I guess, because like PMI does that, right? If you go on the PMI website, they're like, hey, listen, what are you looking for? Take this if this, right? Like are you doing this? This is what it's for. are you doing that? This is
Right.
what it's for. I feel like that there's, again, caveated with this is not my bag, right? So I walked in with like, it's like I'm a, kickboxer and it's like, this is a wrestling school. Like, okay, cool. I know it's going to be some fun times there, right? Like, this is like, we don't do that.
Well, at
boxing
least it
stuff.
wasn't golf
Yeah,
compared
and
to
listen,
kickboxing. I mean,
true. At least it's sort of, and
you
that
know,
is a really good way to kind of say it. It wasn't completely like, let's do some pickleball, right? And I thought we were holding pads, right? But it's still
right.
different enough that, but again, like that analogy, like it definitely expanded my skill set. I feel a little bit more comfortable, maybe in certain rooms now, at least understanding perspectives and the inversion for me of like, I'm a cyber person talking business versus no, listen, I'm like good. I'm useful to the org I'm in and my specialty happens to be this. That switch is, I think, something that's going to help me in 26 and beyond, I hope. And that's what really
I was
committed
gonna say,
me
I'd
to
love
saying,
to
yeah,
have you revisit that in
I think
6 months,
so.
12 months,
Yep.
and see how this has played out and in that way for you, for your business, because that's the things we talk about all the time when we're chatting on LinkedIn and everything else, which is, you may be in cyber, but you have to learn to speak the business language of your particular business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know we've written articles on risk, and not all risk is the same. You've got financial risk, legal risk, insurance risk,
Mm-hmm.
cyber risk, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's coming at the same word with a different understanding and a different lens and a different
Mm-hmm.
way of kind of approaching it. And so your reason for taking the cert makes total sense of, let me see if I can take the risk world I work in
Mm-hmm.
and translate this to business language so that they can have business results and
Mm-hmm.
that I'm speaking in a way that they understand so I can get the buy-in for what I need to do on the cyber side,
Mm-hmm.
which makes total sense. So I am curious to see where you are in 6 months, 12 months as we continue the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just comment, below this post
Yeah.
or another one of
Yeah.
here's how it worked, here's how it didn't, here's how it may have played out, or I saw these skills come into my
Absolutely.
experience, because I think that'll be interesting for the audience to see your journey on that.
That'll make sense. And absolutely. I love the, again, looking back and almost doing like was the juice worth the squeeze? Is the ROI there? Is what I thought
That's right.
it was going to help with, going to actually materialize. That's really good. And I know for one, my family and friends are happy with that sort of reflection, right? Because like, hey, don't just get them because they're there, man. Do it intentionally and understand.
You gotta Pokemon, you gotta catch a ball.
Listen, that is really has been, but there's just no more, and I'll say this, Alyson, like, can't be pulling those all-nighters anymore. It really, I felt it for the next couple of days after
You are
having to
not
go
20
shovel.
anymore, my
That's
friend.
the thing. And they were shoveling,
Our
as you
bodies are
know,
not 20.
and we talked
Right.
about like they were shoveling the
Mhm.
next day. That's why when I say I took a nap and woke up because they were like snowed. Like in the 2 hours that I took some Z's and I was like,
No.
I really did this to myself, right? Like the entire time that I'm just doing it. I'm like, this is, no, it's true. It gave me some reflection and I was like, okay, is this how you want to take into 26? Put that energy somewhere else and go forward, in grace. So, but yeah, we'll revisit.
So Omar's tip,
Yeah.
do not take this during the winter when you have to cram and then snowplow.
Yeah. Honest to God, like, and I wonder why it was like, oh, some of these were hard. Like, bro, like it's just me talking to myself, right? Like, what are you doing?
You had frostbite and you were, snow brain,
I
forget
was,
it, and
yeah.
physical drain. That was it.
And honestly, the cold does, it just makes my back hurt.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it's just like, yeah, it's not fun. And
Yeah, you
but
don't want to be uncomfortable when you're taking an exam and
no,
aches and no.
but weirdly, some of that was part of the allure for me at this point, at this stage in the career. I'm not gonna lie. Like, okay, let's put other, like, can I do it with this?
Let's
Can I
make
do
it
it
a
with
bit
that?
harder than it needs to be, says
Yeah,
Omar.
honestly, kind of like, let's see if I can.
Challenge accepted.
Why not? Let's figure it out. Oh, that wasn't fun. Don't do that again. Okay, I should have known. But yeah, no, thanks.
So going back to don't touch the hot stove, Omar's going to touch the hot
It's
stove.
gonna happen. Like, and you know what? I'm living it right with my family at this point. She's definitely a hot stove aficionado. She definitely yeah, it's happening. So,
Well,
but
I love it. Well, we'll definitely follow up on this
absolutely.
and see how this plays out, especially since it's not your normal and that it's meant to bridge
Mhm.
that additional conversation with those stakeholders. And I'm curious to see if you find that the benefit in that and that
Wonderful.
the knowledge from this really does help propel that part of your professional experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Alyson. Thanks for joining me. And thanks everyone for listening. And of course, as always, keep it cyber metal. Take care.